This is section 10.3, factoring trinomials in the form x squared plus bx plus c. That basically just means there's a number with the x and then a number at the end there. Alright, so what we're going to do is, again, it's kind of the reverse of what we were doing last chapter. Last section we did, it was like reverse distributive property. Here, this is kind of like reverse of the foiling, so like first, outside, inside, last. We're basically doing that backwards, okay? So what we can do here to try this is we know that the x squared is going to be affected by this number here and this number here. So this x squared is dealing with that x, and it's dealing with that x. Okay, so to get x squared, I'm dealing with that and that. The 8 is from this space and this space, and we don't quite know what numbers those are yet. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to guess and check some numbers that are going to multiply to be 8, because our last thing here, 8, is whatever the last thing is times the last thing is. Now our middle number here, the 6x, is actually dealing with both of those, because it's the 6 times one of the blanks there, and then one of the blanks times the x. So the 6 is actually dealing with both of those groups. So what we can do here is we can guess and check. When we are guessing and checking, we are looking for numbers that multiply to be 8 and add to be 6. Okay, so what I would do is I'd go through and check things that multiply to be 8. So if I took like 1 times 8, that gives me 8. When I go to check to see what that adds to, 1 plus 8 is 9, so that's not going to work. Next one I check would be 2 times 4. 2 times 4 is 8, so that works for multiply. 2 plus 4 is 6, so that also works for what we're trying to add to. So this is our one that's going to work. So how we write that out for our answer would be x plus, and then here we put one of our factors, so like 2, then we go x plus our other one, which would be 4. Now let's check this here to see if we did this right. So you can check it by doing FOIL. So what we can do is we can do x times x, which would be x squared. So those two are how we get that first one there. Then our outside would be x times 4, so that would be 4x. Inside would be x times 2, so 2x. And then our last, just like we showed here, the 8 is coming from those two blank spots there, so the 2 times the 4, which gives us 8. Now here, we can look and see that these two numbers here, the 4 and the 2, add to 6, and then there with the 8, they multiply to 8. So that's how we're getting the add to 6 and multiply to 8. Because then those added together, kind of simplified out, would be x squared plus 6x plus 8, which is exactly what we started with. Okay? So it's basically reversing our FOIL. And then you don't have to check it at the end, but it is wise to at least check it in your head at the end, just to make sure you are doing it correct. Alright, so let's try one out here. So we're going to factor this trinomial. So I've got x squared plus x minus 12. So I am looking to multiply to be the 12, or in this case a minus 12 or a negative 12. So I'm looking to multiply to be negative 12. And I'm looking to, usually I make these in a little chart here, I'm looking to add, or a sum, to be the middle number, which in this case is just an x, which would be 1. So then what I do is I guess and check things that multiply to be 12. So I could go, okay, if I'm going through my factors, the first one would be 1 and 12. So if I take 1 times 12, I get 12, but now since I want this to be a negative 12, I have to make one of these values a negative. So like if I go negative 1 times 12, that would be a negative 12. Then when I add those together, negative 1 plus a positive 12 gives me 11. That's not my 1, so that's not my one that works. So I try another option. So what if I went 1 and instead of a positive 12, I went a negative 12 there and a positive 1? still multiplies out to be negative 12. When I go and add those, 1 plus negative 12 gives me negative 11. Still doesn't work. Okay, so 1 and 12 doesn't work. Next one would be 2 and 6. So if I try out 2 and 6, it would be negative 2 times 6, which would be negative 12. And then if I add those, so negative 2 plus 6 would be 4. So that doesn't work. And if I switch it around here, positive 2 and a negative 6, that would be negative 12 as well. So that's good. But now when I add these, 2 and a negative 6 just comes out to be negative 4. So that's no good either. So then I want to try my next one here, which would be 2 didn't work, so 3 and 4 is my next one. So negative 3 times a positive 4 would give me negative 12. Then if I take a negative 3 plus a positive 4, that gives me 1. Well, that's exactly what I was looking for. Multiplied to 12, add to be 1. So this is my one that works here. So I need to use a negative 3 and a positive 4 when I write this out. So I would go parentheses, my x is at the beginning. Then I've got minus 3 or a negative 3, so it could either be minus 3 or plus a negative 3, either way. And then a positive 4, so plus 4. Then you could just kind of go through this and FOIL it in your head and see if it comes out. So that'd be x squared. Outside would be a 4x. Inside would be a negative 3x. So together 4 and negative 3 adds to be 1. So that's good because that checks out there. And then my last would be negative 3 times 4, which gives me a negative 12. So that works out for that. So really it's just a bunch of guessing and checking until you get something that works. I usually try to follow a systematic way, like going in order like that, so like 1, 2, 3, and so on. Really, you can guess and check in any order. I just like doing it in an order so I know that I've gone through all my options and not just skipping around. But really, it's up to you what you want to do there. Alright, let's try another one here. So this one, we've got x squared minus 9x plus 8. Okay, so we are looking to multiply to 8, so the end one there, so multiply to 8, and we are looking to add to the middle one, which would be negative 9. Okay, so things that multiply to be 8. Well, we got 1 and 8, right? So I go 1 times 8, gives me 8. Now if I take 1 and 8 and add those, I get a positive 9. Okay, well, if I just keep multiplying positive numbers there, I'm probably never going to add to a negative, right? So I should probably try multiplying by negatives. So now if I do this, so let's try 1 and 8 again. If I just make one of those negative, so a negative 1 times a positive 8, that's going to come out to be a negative 8, and I don't want that. I want it to be a positive 8 there. So what I need to do is I actually need to make both of these a negative. So if I make both of those a negative, that comes out to be a positive 8, so that checks out. And then when I add those, negative 1 and negative 8, comes out to be a negative 9, which now that checks out for me, and I don't even have to try, 2 and 4 or negative 2 and negative 4, because I know this one's already going to work. So then I can just do my parentheses groups here, and I can go, okay, I got x, then I got a negative 1, so minus 1, x, and I got a negative 8, so minus 8. Then if I wanted to, I could check by doing my FOIL, and it should come out to be correct there. So that one didn't take as many options because it was 1 and 8, which was one of the first ones we picked. Now, you could have done like the 2 and the 4 too, so like if you did like, negative 2 and negative 4, those would multiply to be a positive 8, but then when you add them, negative 2 and negative 4, you get negative 6. So there were other options you could check as well, but we did come up with it on the second one. Alright, next one here. So this one, we are looking to multiply to be 1, and we are looking to add to be 1 as well. Okay, so things that multiply to be 1. So I know the only thing that multiplies to be 1 would be 1 and 1. So I go 1 and 1, that equals 1. If I take 1 plus 1, I get 2, so that doesn't work out. I could also probably try the negatives of that, so like -1 and -1, that would still multiply out to be a +1, but then when I add -1 and -1, I get -2, so that doesn't really work. And then I'm thinking, okay, well, there's nothing else that multiplies to be 1, and none of that adds up to be 1. So in a situation like this, where nothing works at all after you've tried every single option, this would be prime. So it's just like the ones we had in a previous section where nothing can work, nothing can pull out of any of them, or we can't factor out with anything like that. We just call that prime. Okay, but you want to make sure you try all of your options first and don't just throw a prime down to guess at it. Try all your options first. Alright, so let's try here on page 436, A through F, and then I'll get you the answers here. So I'm on the wrong page here. Alright, so 436 for A, they got in parentheses x plus 2, and then in the other parentheses group, x plus 1. Now, if you had this written out as x plus 1 first and then x plus 2 at the end, that would be totally fine too. Then our B is a plus 3 and a plus 1. C is b plus 2 and b plus 2, so that actually came out to be the same numbers there. D is parentheses y minus 3, or you could do plus a negative 3, and then y minus 4, or plus a negative 4. E, you get n minus 7 and n plus 2. And then for F, it comes out to be prime because nothing is possible with that one. Okay, next set of stuff here. So these next ones we're going to do actually are going to have a number out front here, so they're going to have like a 4 or a 5 or whatever out front. But what we can do is we can use similar to what we were doing the other day where we pulled out greatest common factors. The next few ones we do here are going to have greatest common factors we pull out front to make these problems a little bit easier. So if I'm looking at that there, 4x squared minus 8x minus 60. Okay, so I know all of those numbers there, 4, 8, and 60, are all divisible by 4. So what I can do is I can pull a 4 out front, and if I take a 4 out front of all of those, so 4 divided by 4 would be 1, and then I got the x squared, so 1x squared, or x squared. If I pull a 4 out of the 8, that gives me a 2, so minus 2x. And if I pull a 4 out of 60, that gives me 15. So minus 15 for that one. Okay, so now I've got this down to something I can deal with, where I've got the x squared minus 2x minus 15. And I can take and make my chart here. And I am looking for things that multiply to be negative 15. And I am looking for things that add to be negative 2. Now, something that's easily forgotten here is forgetting about that 4 out front. What I usually do is I kind of just draw an arrow to the end of that, so I remember when I write this out, I need to put my 4 there, and then my 2 parentheses. So I usually drop that down right away just as a reminder, or I draw that arrow in just as a reminder so I don't forget to put that 4 out front. Because if I don't put it out front, it's a different problem than if I do put it out front. Alright, so now I am looking for things that are going to multiply to be a negative 15. Okay, another thing to kind of mention here is if we are ever looking to multiply to be a negative, so if your last number here is a negative, we're always going to have numbers with different signs. Okay, because if we multiply to be a negative, one of them's got to be positive and one of them's got to be negative. So that's something that you can just kind of quick pay attention to and go, okay, you know, I'm multiplying to be a negative, they've got to have different signs, and then when I add them, I want to add to a negative 2, so my bigger number out of the ones I'm multiplying has to be the negative for this to work out. Okay, because like if I'll show you here. So like if I did something that multiplies to be 15 would be like -1 and a +15. When I multiply those, I get a -15 because I knew, you know, they've got to have different signs, so a positive and a negative. But now when I go to add these here, -1 and a +15 is going to come out to be a positive number because the bigger number there was positive. So realistically, I probably shouldn't have set it up like that. I probably should have set this up with a +1 and a -15 because that still multiplies to be -15. Now when I add them, since my bigger number is the negative, this is going to come out to be a negative when I add them. It won't be the right negative, but it will be a negative. So -14 there. Okay, so I can use that to check my next ones here because I'm going to go, my next set of factors would be 3 and 5. So I'm going to go 3 and 5 there. And using the philosophy that I just talked about here, knowing that I need to add to a negative, my bigger number out of these two should be the negative. So I need to make the 5 a negative, which would multiply to be -15. And then here, I can go, okay, 3 plus a -5 would give me a -2. If I would have swapped that around, the negative with the 3 and the positive with the 5, it would have given me a +2. Okay, so that's just something that you can kind of keep in mind to speed this up a little bit, because I know these take a long time. Alright, so that's what I've got there for my numbers. So I'm going to use 3 and -5. So I'm going to go x to +3, x, and a -5, so -5, and that would be my answer there. And I could always FOIL that out and then multiply the whole thing by 4, and it should be that same exact original thing. So if you're not sure, you can check all of these by doing FOIL and seeing if you go back to your original number there. Alright, so let's try some of these. So on 437, try out G through H. So G, they got 3 out front, so they pulled out a greatest common factor of 3 from everything. And then when they factored out what was left, they got y minus 6 and y plus 3. So you can think, okay, I know I've got a -54 divided by 3 would be, oh gosh, I'm going to have to use my calculator, 54 divided by 3, 18. So at the end there you've got a -18, and since you know that it's negative, you knew that you had to have different signs, and your middle number is also negative, so a negative, if you pull 3 out, it would be -3. So you know the negative has to go with the bigger of those two numbers. Okay. Then we've got H, which those end up being all positives, which is great. So we've got 5 out front, and then m plus 5 in parentheses, and then the other parentheses is m plus 4. Okay, next thing here, we have got a story problem, and we are finding area. So we're going to find the area of the shaded part, and the shaded part is basically going to be kind of around that little box there. Okay, so that's our shaded part, and this inside little square there, it's not really a square because it's 4 by 2, but that inside rectangle is missing and it's not shaded in. Okay, so if I'm going to find area here, I know I'm going to have to take my big rectangle, which is shaded in, and subtract away my small rectangle. So the dimensions of my big rectangle are x minus 2 by x, so I'm going to go x times x minus 2, and then I know the area or the dimensions of my small rectangle are 4 by 2, so I'm going to go minus 4 by 2, and I'm going to simplify that out a little bit. So x times x would be x squared, x times 2, or the minus 2, would be negative 2x, and then this would be minus, and then 4 times 2 would be 8. Okay, so now since we're working on the factoring stuff, we're going to want to take and factor this out here. So I make my little table, and I go, okay, I want to multiply to be a -8, and I want to add to be a -2. So I know if this number is a negative, I'm going to have different signs here. So one positive, one negative, and the bigger of those has to be the negative because I want to add to be a negative here. Okay, so things that multiply to be 8. Okay, so if we check 1 and 8. So 1 times 8 is 8. And we've got to go one of them negative and one of them positive. I know the bigger one has to be negative to get a negative out here when I add. So if I make that a negative there, that would be 1 plus a negative 8. It'd give me a negative 7. Doesn't work out, so I try something else. So I know if I swap that around and make that a negative 1 and a positive 8, it should be a negative there. It's still going to multiply out to be a negative 8, and then when I add it, it's just going to come out to be a positive 7, so I'm not going to worry about checking that one because I know it's just going to be the opposite of that. So let's try 2 and 4. So if I try 2 and 4 here, to get to a negative 8, one of them has to be negative, and I want to make, since this needs to add to a negative, I need to make the bigger one a negative. So now if I take a positive 2 plus a negative 4, that gives me a negative 2, which is exactly what I was looking for. So that's the one that works. So then when I write out my parentheses groups here, I'm going to have x, and then it's a positive 2, so plus 2, x and a negative 4, so x minus 4. And that would be my answer. Okay, so that's all we've got for notes. So your book page assignment is 438, 20 to 50 even.